The Particular Abilities of Marinette and Her Discovery of Them by Planzerfun06. A Miraculous Ladybug, Batman, crossover fanfic. Chapter 10. Training, Training, and More Training. We at the Justice League International would like to inform you that making false reports and or allegations, such actions in your region, make you liability to a fine up to $2,000, as well as up to 30 days jail time. We ask you refrain from making false reports in the future. So, this was both bad news and good news. Bad news because they didn't believe them. Good news because if they continued to call, they would either eventually believe them, or they would bring charges against them. That might seem like a bad thing, but in reality, that only meant that if they did bring charges against them, they would be forced to come to Paris, and they would learn that they, in fact, were not lying. As long as they continued to call, eventually, one or the other would happen. Ladybug set up a secure line from her bug phone to the public Justice League report number. Any and all messages sent on secure lines could not be interfered with by outside sources, including other miraculous technology, meaning that Ladybug and Chat Noir were able to safely send messages to the Justice League without fear of Hawkmoth finding out and intercepting and tampering with the messages. They may get a few more of the obvious copy and paste replies about their policy, saying that they are lying, but eventually they would get their help. They had to. Right? Ladybug and Chat Noir decided to make a practice of their Saturday night schedule meetups, and patrol would be the time that they would send video messages. Whether it would be Chat Noir making the video and sending it to Ladybug before she sent it off, or Ladybug making it and sending it directly to them. They both ensured that every Saturday night a video message did get sent. Every time they got the same copy and paste message about how if they kept this up, they would get fined and go to jail. But both of them were ready for someone to come and try to prosecute them against this. All it would mean was that they would finally get some assistance. A few months since the war against Hawkmoth, with no sign of the Justice League actually coming, new heroes were created. They only got their miraculous when necessary. But both Rena Rouge and Carapace made great additions to their team. They'd even start to accompany them on Saturday night patrols. They started on the rotation and made the videos themselves, sending them off to Ladybug after. Being on Saturday, patrols also allowed them to train with Ladybug and Chat Noir. Being a Hashin came with a lot of perks, you could call it, one of them being dreams of the past lives. Before having actual contact with her miraculous, those dreams were like any other. Strange, distorted, and after a few hours of being awake, completely faded. That was if she even remembered them at all. While she had her link with the actual Kwame of creation since she was 3, the link to her past lives hadn't been completely opened up until the moment she made contact with the Ladybug Miraculous, therefore making contact with the thing that bound her soul, and therefore past lives, to this plane. The special thing about these dreams were not only that she experienced them with her sight, despite the fact that none of her past lives had her sight, and most of them weren't even a realized Hashin. Though because of the now complete connection, the activities, hobbies, jobs that they enjoyed and frequently did, Marinette found herself able to do them too. There was Apolline, a girl who lived in Germany in the 1400s. She loved to play skittles. It was a predecessor to bowling, and Apollina was quite good at it. In turn, Marinette found she was a good bowler. It seemed to startle people when she got a strike and spares on the one time that her, Kim, Nino, and Alia had all gone bowling. Kim had laughed so hard that he ended up actually throwing up his french fries, and everyone else brushed it off like a huge joke. Another of her past lives was Kujipuri. She lived in what would now be India. Marinette hadn't been able to decipher what time period Kujipuri, but she could tell by the clothes they wore and the style of houses. It was a long time ago. She lived as a basket weaver, and Marinette found herself surprisingly good at weaving together wicker when she and her parents had gone to an arts festival. But the most useful by far was the life of Dianthe, a warrior, the first wielder of the Ladybug Miraculous she had dreamt of. Dianthe, too, had her possession of the miraculous in a time of great need. At that time, someone had gotten their hands on the Black Cat Miraculous and was hell-bent on destroying their world with it. He apparently had been the one to sink the city of Atlantis. Dianthe had sought help, as she too had been shoved into a role she wasn't ready for, and had forged a friendship with Hippolyta, the queen of the Amazons of Themyscira. Hippolyta trained Diathon extensively in the form of Amazonian combat, including all weaponry, not just the yo-yo. The training Diathon went through led her to become one of the most powerful users of the miraculous jewelry, if the records that Master Fu had shown her were to be believed. Luckily for Marinette, Diathon's memory of training and Hippolyte's tutelage had bled over into her own life. Marinette found herself having full and clear memories of her dreams, and it seemed her muscles did as well. She was able to perform maneuvers and skills that would require years of practice with perfect ease. She was able to teach Chat Noir all of this as well. They had both agreed, only days after the first Akuma, Stoneheart, that they could not sit idly and half do everything until the Justice League came to help, meaning that they also could not go on with little to no combat. Chat Noir had stressed that it would be impossible for him to get any martial arts training in his civilian life. So Ladybug had simply told him that she had, and started to personally teach him for an hour before patrol every day, as well as various meeting up times throughout the week. Once Rena Rouge and Carapace had joined the miraculous team, as the media had dubbed them, on Saturday patrols, they would get an hour of training with both Marinette instructing and Chat Noir helping her. Considering that he was getting more training on the days of the week, and with the near constant practice he was getting with an average of 3 Akumas a week, he was progressing along nicely. Their team was stronger than they had been able to hope for. The partnership between Ladybug and Chat Noir was better than she had ever expected them to be. Strong enough to tell Chat Noir her biggest secret. "I'm blind," Marinette said, sitting on top of the Eiffel Tower where she had asked to meet earlier, before their Wednesday patrol. What? She had gotten better over the months at spotting his movements, but his facial features were still hard for her to discern. It made times like these difficult, considering she was having a very hard time trying to figure out what he was feeling. "I'm blind. My eyes don't work, and therefore I am incapable of basic human sight." He paused for a moment before looking at her as if she was slightly crazy. "Well, my lady, if you want to... well, how do you do what you do if you're blind? I mean, I've seen you hit a target from 60 feet away. I've seen you swing from building to building. I've quite literally seen you observe an area and make a plan." He was gesturing blankly from their view on the Eiffel Tower. "I mean, you train me, correct me on my techniques constantly. I mean, I have a friend who's blind, and I'm pretty sure she could do about anything she wanted to. But how exactly can you do all of this without sight?" "No, I can see. It's just..." It was surprisingly difficult to explain this to someone. It just hit her that she never put words to exactly what her sight was. "Just not like you. You see, I'm something called a Hashin. It's a complicated thing to explain in detail, and if you want, I'll send you my note from my bug phone on them if you want. But they're sort of like metahumans. But Hashins are related directly to the miraculous." She tried to focus on Chat Noir to gauge his reaction on what she was saying. She didn't know his stance on metahumans at all, and she was afraid that her relating herself to metahumans might set him off. But he seemed to be silently listening. "I'm specifically the creation Hashin, which was why it was me who was chosen to be Ladybug. Being a creation Hashin gives me the ability to see every living thing around us, because the Ladybug Miraculous is essentially what gives me my abilities. Every plant, every animal, every person. And it's not with my eyes. I can see everything around me. And I guess I could see through walls. More like radar or sonar. That's why I can track down where Akumas are in the building pretty easily, because I can just see the whole building all at once." She had no idea if this was making any sense to him, but she was just gonna roll with it, and he could ask her questions later. "Lately, with the constant exposure to the miraculous that gives me my sight, I've even started to be able to see microorganisms that are close to me. Like, the other day, I was on the subway, and the man next to me sneezed, and I could see all the microorganisms in the sneeze." She wasn't sure if he was understanding. She probably could have explained it much better. She could tell he was a bit stunned by what she said, simply staring at her wide-eyed, and mouth ajar. While she was pretty good at figuring out what people were thinking, or what they were about to do or say, she couldn't possibly anticipate what he said next. She nearly missed it with how quietly he whispered it. I'm working with Toph Beifong? That caught her off guard. Chat, I don't know who Toph Beifong is, but we are supposed to keep our identities secret, and I can assure you I'm not her. She tried to clarify. That seemed to break him out of his trance. Oh, no, I know you're not her. She's from an American cartoon I like. She's a badass too. And with that, Chat Noir got up. He extended his baton to go off on patrol. Before he could, she grabbed him by the ankle to stop him. Chat Noir, you cannot tell anyone. Do you understand? The only reason I told you is because I'm struggling during Akumas in the newer buildings. I can't see metal or concrete. But Chat Noir, you have to understand. No one, not Rena, not Carapace, not anyone gets told this. His shoulders relaxed, and she was pretty sure she saw a soft smile bloom on his face. Of course, don't worry about the new buildings. We can work on compensating for that. Makes sense now why you were clingy during the Puppet Master now. I thought the Akuma was just freaking you out, but Bug. He walked over and crouched down, placing a hand on her shoulder. Thank you for telling me. And don't worry too much. You're a badass. New buildings are not going to be able to stop you. I have faith. With those last words, he swung off silently to do patrol. If Ladybug could list her top 10 strangest conversations she had with Chat Noir to date, and he certainly had strange topics he liked to discuss when bored, that conversation definitely made the cut. In all honesty, she did not think he would take it that well at all. She couldn't really decide what his reaction would probably be. She knew he would never force her to give up her miraculous. But that wouldn't stop certain nightmares from circulating around her head. Really, her worst fear would be that he wouldn't trust her, whether it was because she kept it a secret so long, or because he didn't think she was capable of being a superhero. She really couldn't decide, but the idea of him dismissing her idea, plans, and any level of authority she had over the team haunted her. The last thing she was expecting was for him to say she was a badass, gave a thank you, and go off on patrol, as if she had told him her favorite color was pink. Not that she could actually see color. Not the expected reaction, but hey, maybe she should have a little more faith in him too. With combat training came other forms of training as well. The first big change, funny enough, had nothing directly to do with Ladybug. While Marinette had always done exceedingly well in gymnastics, being able to see her muscles move helped her a lot. She had always done well in competitions that she had been permitted to attend, which, admittedly, had only been a few. It was just recently that she was able to start placing very regularly. The balance beams had always been her best event, being that she was actually able to see her muscles and align them properly. She was able to do a multitude of flips and tricks while still staying on the beam. While whenever she went to competition, she got first place, every time. While she was doing about the same as always, which was to mean awful. She hated the vault. Her floor exercise was doing well. She had been placing high in nearly all her competitions. Recently, her uneven bars had been the one to improve the most, either placing first or second in every competition she attended. Now, due with the act that every night she was using the same baseline skills she learned on the uneven bars to patrol the city, possibly. But she wasn't complaining. It would be a joke if she wasn't improving with the amount of time she spent utilizing those skills. On top of the time she spent as Ladybug, Marinette spent about an average of 18 hours in the gym per week, not accounting for the approximate 5 hours she spent on Akumas a week, or 15 hours she spent on patrols or in training. It would be a joke if her gymnastics weren't getting better with the amount of time she was utilizing it. The only reason Marinette had any semblance of free time was because Akumas often occurred during school hours, and how insistent both Alia and Nina were on making sure she got time to wind down and just have fun. Apparently, they tag-teamed with her. It was both her and Adrian to assume they weren't overworked. She also got wind down when her first gymnastics instructor, a man named Clyde, would occasionally come to her gym when she was practicing to see her. She didn't get to see him often enough. She didn't know it when she was a kid, but a lot of instructors and teachers at the gym she first went to didn't really want to work with her. At the time, Marinette hadn't been comfortable without wearing something over her scars in front of a bunch of people. She couldn't wear sunglasses during gymnastics like she did at school, so Sabine and Tom had opted for her to do one-on-one classes till she could have some privacy, which she'd have to do regardless. Apparently Clyde was the only one who stepped up to teach her when she was 5 years old. Working with children has always been hard, but working with a blind child was another level of difficulty. He would always be kind and patient with her. He was very good at verbalizing things to her in a way that she could understand. He would walk her through everything and assure she did everything properly. He was incredibly patient, even after days of not being able to do something relatively simple, or time where she simply couldn't understand what to do. She had no doubt it was because of that man that she excelled so much at gymnastics. It was because of that man that she was the person she was today. He had instilled so much confidence in her as a child when she was incredibly insecure when it came to tasks at the risk of failure. He helped her learn that not everything necessarily had to be done perfectly, and taught her that it was okay to make mistakes, and that it was a good thing because it helped her learn. It was a bit of a reprieve when she came in. They would talk some, and she would maybe show him a new routine, and he would help her with it, though she didn't get to see him too much. And with her gymnastics training, she had her magic too. While her combat training occurred with Cat Noir, and her guardian training occurred with Master Fu, he had little to no knowledge on the actual utilization of Hashin's magic, as it was very poorly documented. Her magic training occurred solely with Tiki, and did Tiki have a lot to teach her. Using Hashin magic from her very soul was very taxing. Tiki said the more she used it, it would get a lot easier. She was constantly touching into that connection to her soul to see, and at this point, she was completely used to it, and Tiki said the same would occur with other forms of magic, though they only ever practiced magic before she went to bed, on healing most recently. It was apparently one of the easier things to do. She would focus her energy onto a point, the injury, and wherever it might be on her or another person, it would heal. Pressing living matter, such as a plant or sometimes a hand, to the particular spot would allow her to focus better. Another thing that had recently been getting started was on pouring creation into an organism. She had a plethora of plants on her balcony to try it with, and Tiki had walked her through it, though it was a very tricky task. The thing that Tiki had been very firm to teach her was that creation and destruction lived together. It would forever be that way. With one came the other, and not even the Kwami were able to do a thing about it. When Marinette imagined what it would be like to pour creation into her Gabbara daisies, she imagined them growing several inches, maybe the petals getting bigger. She thought that maybe she would be able to control and manipulate plants, something along the lines of the ability of Poison Ivy, one of Gotham City's, the USA's, rogues, who possessed botanokinesis. Imagine her disappointment and sadness when the daisies died. Tiki compared it to a cycle. If you were to put some creation on one plate, the universe would put some destruction on the other. She could only manipulate creation, and therefore destruction was left up to the hands of the universe to even it out and keep the balance. Her ability to keep those rules, when she put creation into an organism, was less that she was growing it and closer to aging it. If she did it slowly, she would see as it would bloom, lose its petals and leaves, and eventually die. It was fascinating to watch in a plant, to see right before her eyes its cycle of life. She wanted to see it in other organisms, but the thought of doing that to something living and breathing, if just a rat from the dumpster out back, sent shivers up her spine that were quickly disregarded. She was content buying a pack of seeds from the local florist and having freshly bloomed flowers the next day. Chloe Borgres. She was rightfully pissed. Ladybug knew when something was her own blame, and the majority of this situation was her own doing. At the end of the day, losing the Bee Miraculous during the akumatization of Style Queen was her own fault. Granted, she was stressed. Chat Noir was out of commission because apparently he lost his Miraculous. There would be words. And her current partner was the embodiment of destruction with uncontrollable amounts of power that she was unable to see, and she was only able to find where he was when he deemed himself to talk. At the end of the day, she should not have made the decision to go to Master Fu, or rather, she should have been infinitely more cautious when carrying around one of the most powerful artifacts in the universe. The Be Miraculous ending up in the hands of someone who should not be in possession of it was entirely her own fault. All of the events following that, Ladybug did not put the blame on herself for. The only person that was to blame for these events was one person, Chloe Borgres. She revealed her identity to the world without a single care, essentially telling everyone in Paris, including Hawkmoth, where they would be able to find a Miraculous. She created her own train incident so she could save it. She refused to give up the Be Miraculous after being told to do so. And yet, the image of Chloe crying in front of her mother drew up feelings buried so deep inside Marinette that she dutifully ignored when possible. Marinette saw the way that Chloe reacted when Audrey asked if she wanted to come to New York to be her new muse, offering her and her parents a luxury apartment to live in, as well as offering to get Marinette into a big sports magnet school in New York, where she could be taught by some of the best in the world, on the condition that Marinette would model for her, of course. She saw how Chloe looked when Audrey complimented her on her skills in gymnastics, and the amount of competition she had won, often against older gymnasts. She talked about the beauty of her gymnastics. She saw how Chloe got angry, frustrated, how she had become outright enraged. So maybe that's why Chloe asked her mother why she didn't love her. Hurt Marinette in such a deep way. How many times had she wanted to ask Mother that? Mother, why do you hit me? Mother, why don't you talk to me? Mother, why are you avoiding me? Mother, why don't you love me? Marinette knew that desperation for love. Marinette knew how she would mimic every action of her mother to a T, as if trying to prove herself. How Chloe imitated Audrey in every reaction, despite how she could sometimes see Chloe slightly hesitate before insulting an innocent person in front of her mother. Marinette remembered how Marinette would have groveled at her mother's feet for a single repeat of her mother looking her in the eye. How Marinette could see Chloe stop breathing for only a moment when Audrey would call her an assortment of names. Clara, Claudine, Courtney, Casserole, before having to correct herself, not once getting Chloe's name right on the first try. She knew exactly how Chloe felt. So maybe that's why when Chloe came up to her and gave her possibly the most backhanded thank you, Marinette said, "You're welcome." And while nothing made up for the years of bullying and torment, but maybe they could start anew.